Good afternoon and welcome to this Planning Committee meeting of the 24th of February 2026. I'd like to welcome members of the public attending today, my fellow committee members and our planning officers and support staff. Before we begin with the official part of the meeting, just some important housekeeping rules. So the meeting today is being broadcast live via YouTube and will be archived for future viewings. However, just to note that one speaker for today has been asked not to film, so the cameras will not focus on this public speaker during his part or her part of the meeting. However, the audio recording will remain. If I can ask all councillors and officers to please ensure you press your microphones on when speaking and off when finished. If we can switch off our mobile phones and turn them on to silent. Not expecting any fire test alarms today, so if you hear the fire alarm, it will be a real call, so back out the way we came in. Polite notice not to call out when individuals are speaking, as it will prevent others from hearing the debate. So before we move into the main agenda, I'd just like to ask officers from my right and committee members to press your mics and introduce yourselves. Myself, I'm Councillor Arshad Afsar. I'll be the chairman for today's meeting.
Good afternoon, Naomi Perry, Planning Manager.
Good afternoon, Lisa Bird, Principal Planning Officer.
Mark Evans, Staffordshire County Council Highways.
Claire Simpson, Staffordshire County Council Highways.
Good afternoon, Councillor Monica Holton.
Good afternoon, Councillor Michael Slater.
Good afternoon, Councillor Sheila McKiernan for Shobnall Ward.
Thomas Deary, Head of Regeneration and Development.
Councillor Bev George.
Collingwood, Councillor Blythe Ward.
Councillor Jackie Jones.
Councillor Chris Smedley.
Emily Thomas, Democratic Services Officer.
Akil Adnan, Planning Solicitor.
Thank you, members. Just one final point to today's meeting, just to make everybody aware that there's been a slight change in the order that the applications will be discussed. So moving on to the main agenda for today. So we've got agenda item number 1. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor Legg and Councillor Bullock.
Agenda item number 2. Do we have any declarations of interest? Any member got a declaration of interest? Councillor George.
Yeah. What would be the first application? 01084. I'm friends with a lot of the objectors.
Sorry, when you say from an application point of view, has anyone lobbied you or spoken to you about the application?
Yeah, frequently so. And I do a load of keep fit classes with one of the residents, and so there's been quite a bit of discussion, so I don't feel comfortable taking part.
Oh, okay, fine. Yep, that's fine. Okay.
Thank you. That's been noted. Do we have any further declarations of interest? No. Moving on to agenda item number 3. Could I request members to please accept the minutes from the last meeting held on the 27th of January 2026? Can I have a seconder? Councillor Whittaker. All those in favour? That's everybody, thank you. Agenda item number 4. Do we have any urgent business to bring to the committee's attention today? I've had indication that we don't have any urgent business. Moving on to agenda item number 5. The first application to be considered today before committee. Planning application reference P2024-01084. It is for the retention of use as an animal encounter experience, including the retention of a toilet/shower building, enclosed paddock area and reception building including associated parking areas and the retention of a passing place along the access road. Site address is Rossin Farm, Scotch Hills Lane, Barton Gate, Barton under Needwood, DE138DE. If I can ask the officers to present the item.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Members will recall that this application came to committee in December 2025 and was deferred to allow the applicant to consider seasonal opening times. At that time, we did receive some amended details, and the applicant confirmed that seasonal opening from April to December, with the proposals being closed January, February and March, and it was proposed 4 sessions a day maximum. So I'll briefly run through the slides from last time and just focus on the additional information that we've received since the previous meeting. So the application site is shown on the slide here in black. It has been amended as of yesterday to slightly reduce the site area, as can be seen in this little inset here. That basically removes a strip of land from the northern portion and the western portion and removes a little area of land to the south of the existing agricultural building. There is access between that building and the woodland area for pedestrians. So the applicants changed that. We didn't consider that required any additional consultation, as it was a reduction in the site area. So this just shows the site a little more zoomed out. As you can see, there's no listed buildings affected or conservation areas. There is a footpath to the north, but it's unaffected by the proposal sitting outside of the application site. The neighbouring properties are located, the closest ones are located here, some of which share the access to the site along here. There is a passing place which is approximately where my little pointer is at the moment. So in terms of the buildings, as we saw at the site visit in December, there's a paddock area, there's a reception building, a barn that's to be used during inclement weather, and there's parking along here, and then this is just the access to the site, and there's also a small toilet building. And that just shows them a bit more clearly on a Google map image, the buildings to be used. And then just some images of Scotch Hills Road and the access to the site. Photographs of the access where the gate is, the passing place is shown here, which is just beyond this gate up on the right-hand side. Images of the access and parking area into the site, and some photographs of the buildings which are proposed to be used. So that building at the end, there's the agricultural building to be used in inclement weather. There's the reception building here, and then a small toilet building. So these images, the following few slides, just show details of those buildings. So these are all on site, and members will have seen them at the visit. The reception building details, and the toilet and shower block details. There's also an enclosed paddock area that's indicated on that slide. So following deferral at December committee and the submission of the additional information, we didn't have any additional comments or objections received over and above what was received previously. So there were no objections from the Highway Authority following amended operational times previously, no objections from the police, nature space or the environmental health team. The parish council originally commented, and I'll just briefly run through that. They had concerns in respect of the barn to be used, the parking, whether or not it's true diversification, and the intensification of the access primarily. And they did submit additional comments on a reconsultation, still raising concerns, and final comments on a further consultation. But following the December committee deferral, the following comments were received, and it was the parish confirmed that they reiterate their previous comments in respect of farm diversification proposals, but raised no objections to the proposal as now submitted. That's in. In terms of neighbours, there was 6 objections and 3 support for the original submissions. These, I'll just highlight the headings on these because we went through these at the last meeting. So in principle, issues with them had why they don't show how the buildings could be used for alternative uses, impact on neighbouring amenity and highways impacts, along with other matters including details of the location plan, unauthorised development on the site. There was some support, as I said, for the original consultation, giving a good experience and benefit for mental health and being good for kids. And there were some additional comments on a reconsultation, which again raised the principal issues and highways aspects. Following the committee deferral, these were the comments that were received. So new operational times being too vague and will not relieve the worst months, increased disruption to neighbours, nuisance, obstruction and loss of amenity, unsuitable access, passing place being next to a domestic garage, no maintenance or risk assessment plans submitted, and the traffic management plan showing signage on neighbouring land. So we did receive a comment on the original submission from Councillor George. However, no further comments have been received following the amended details, and the policies used to determine this are the MPPF, the ESBC local plan, the Staff's design guide and the parking standards SPD. In respect of the considerations of the application, in principle, the proposals considered constitute farm diversification, which requires a countryside location. The existing lawful use of the land is agricultural, and the proposal would support the existing lawful use and would make a long-term contribution to sustaining the agricultural enterprise, and so is considered acceptable. In terms of design, the proposals are considered acceptable in visual appearance, being well screened from public vantage points, with the buildings and land being situated within an existing plantation and a significant distance from the main roadways. The buildings are small scale and of an appropriate design and material for the rural location. In terms of residential amenity, the experience itself doesn't generate a significant level of noise and disturbance. However, additional traffic is generated, which is proposed to be managed by spacing out the experiences a maximum of 4 times a day in peak season. That was reiterated in the amended submission. No concerns were raised in respect of noise by the environmental health team, although it's acknowledged that objections have been received from neighbours. It's considered that the activity itself does not have a harmful impact on residential occupiers, and the increase in vehicle movements can be controlled by planning condition. Given the staggering of the events, the proposals are not considered to result in a harmful level of noise and disturbance. And furthermore, there would be 3 months of the year under the new proposals where this use wouldn't be in operation. In terms of highway matters, whilst objections were received to the original consultation, these have been removed following the submission of the management plan in respect of traffic, which includes site signage. There was a comment in respect of that being on neighbouring land, but that is within the red line, and the necessary notices have been served on those occupiers. The parking area on site can accommodate 20 vehicles, which exceeds the level of parking likely to be required, and the Highway Authority haven't requested any visibility displays. The site is not well served by non-car modes of transport. However, farm diversification is supported in the local plan, and generally this would take place in the countryside where the transport options are more limited. In terms of ecology, the development is within an impact zone for great crested newts. However, Nature Space have confirmed that they've got no objections subject to a condition setting out reasonable avoidance measures in relation to that. And given that the development has already been carried out, the condition in respect to that isn't considered to be necessary in this instance. So in conclusion, the proposal complies with the local plan, parking standards SPD, East Staffordshire Design Guide and National Planning Policy Framework. We've worked proactively with the applicant to secure a development that improves the economic, social and environmental conditions of the area in accordance with the MPPF, and the recommendation is to approve with conditions as per the report and update sheet. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one speaker on this item, so if I could ask for Lisa Summers to come forward, please. When you're ready, just press the mic. A red light will come on. You'll get 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicants who are engaged with something that was booked last year, so are unfortunately unable to make it themselves. As suggested in the last committee meeting, we have proposed an updated opening season of April through to December, so remaining closed for experiences during January, February and March. We would also like to answer a number of queries that were raised in the last meeting. The wooden gate remains open whilst experiences are running, only being closed if there is no one on site and overnight. Although the planning officers have said they will not police the number of sessions run, all sessions run are publicly available on our website for anybody to monitor if they wish to. We would like to reassure the committee that when the site is open to the public, it is well presented and we regularly get comments on the beauty of it. We've no visitors currently, and being a working farm, the welfare of the animals is top priority currently, with housekeeping being put further down the list of tasks to complete. In regards to alternative access options onto the site, we do not own any of the land that adjoins the highway, with the only access to our land being across the current shared access driveway. We have approached all neighbouring farms and estates regarding the purchase of one of their fields that span from our land to the highway. However, none are willing to sell currently. Access rights, as stated in the deeds for our property and that of Forest Barn, who own the access way, stated a right in common with all other persons having similar right and those authorised by the trustees to pass and repass over and along the access way with and without vehicles for all purposes, for access to and egress from the adjoining land to the public highway at all times. We would also like to take the opportunity to correct a couple of mistruths told by one of the objectors in the previous committee meeting. He stated that the police have been involved in altercations with the public accessing our site. This is, however, untrue. There has been no police involvement at all. He also claimed that the neighbouring houses are having to protect their properties from the traffic generated from our experiences with cones and bollards. However, this is also untrue. We purchased our property in 2020, almost 4 years before we ran our first experience, and the cones and barriers have been there since before we arrived. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no further speakers on this item, so I'll open the floor up for debate for committee members. Councillor Whittaker.
I think when this last came to the committee, the only issue, was really the what's now being given up by the applicants, which was the fact it was operating 12 months. And that was for the reason to try and give the people who lived close by at least some respite from traffic throughout. And as far as I can see, they've ticked that box and they've complied with everything else, and I can't see any reason why we can't pass this. It obviously ticks the box as sustainable and will help the agriculture, which we know is difficult at present. So I don't think if it helps anything towards the health of the general public and awareness, I think it's a good thing. So I think at this stage we should move ahead and pass it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any further comments from committee members? Councillor McKiernan.
I'd just like to echo what Councillor Whittaker said. That was my main concern last time. So I'm happy to move to the resolution.
That's fine, thank you. Do we have any further comments from any member before we move to a vote? No. So we don't have any further comments on this item, so moving obviously to the officer's recommendation, which is to approve. Councillor Whittaker, you're proposing?
Yes, Chair, I'll propose we accept it as per the officer's recommendation and the conditions are imposed.
Thank you. Councillor McKiernan, you're seconding it?
Yes.
Yeah. So we've got a proposer and a seconder for the item, subject to the officer's recommendations. So all those in favour for approval? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. This application has been passed for approval. Just before we move on to the next item, if anybody wants to leave from the public gallery, they may do so now before we move over to the next item. Thank you, members. We'll move over to the second item on today's agenda. So this is planning application P2025-01134 for the raising of the ridge height of the existing roof, erection of a two-storey rear extension, principal elevation, single-storey front infill extension and first floor extension, and the installation of solar panels and roof lights. The site address is Bouldershore Cottage, Sallyfield Lane, Stanton, Staffordshire, DE6 2DD. I'll just pass over to the planning officer to present the item.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, an application at Bouldershore Cottage, variously spelt, so we're trying to cover our bases. Sometimes it has a U in, sometimes it doesn't. Historically, it was part of Bouldershore, an area part of just a slight hamlet off the main village in Stanton, which we saw this morning. As you say, Chair, it's an application for the raising of the ridge height of the existing roof, the erection of a two-storey extension to the principal elevation, single-storey front infill extension, first floor front extension, and the installation of solar panels and roof lights. So in terms of the location, as we saw this morning, it's a little enclave away from the main part of the village, and the members drove through on the bus afterwards just to give them some context. And the Bouldershore Cottage itself is a two-storey vernacular dwelling. It's located on the southern side of Sallyfield Lane within the conservation area. The properties are joined by another cottage, which is two Bouldershore Cottage, and then there's a farm complex to the north and to the south. Bouldershore Cottage itself is of a circa 17th to 18th century origin, and it's clad in local quarried stone. The property has a part red, part blue Staffordshire clay roof tile and later single-storey extension on the elevation facing Sallyfield Lane, as well as a single-storey mono-pitched extension to the rear elevation. So we've just run through things quickly in terms of remind ourselves from this morning. Here's again just the property in the context of the wider conservation area. So the main heart of the village is here, and Boulder Shore Farm, which is in the main part of the village, and historically Boulder Shore has taken its name from that. It's an integral part of the conservation area and is at the entry into the village as the bus came up today, that way indeed. There was some work had taken place this morning, so there's some Harris fencing on it now, but these are pictures taken a little while ago on previous site visits by officers. So in terms of the elevations, we talked about this morning defining the difference between the street elevations and the principal elevations. So the northern street elevation is this one you've got in front of you, and then you've got the eastern side elevation as it runs down. In terms of the principal elevation, which is overlooking towards the field areas and the farm to the south, there you've got the south principal elevation. So you've got, with its combination, there's been various alterations in the past, and then you've got the western side elevation, which we walk down to get to the rear garden area. In terms of the planning history, just as points of reference, in 2024 the applicant submitted a certificate of lawfulness, which shows the extent of development that can be undertaken at the property without the need to submit an application for planning permission. So members will commonly know this as permitted development. So they can undertake those works provided that the works are undertaken in materials to match the existing. So that effectively would be what somebody could do without having to submit an application to us. Meanwhile, while that application had come in, there was a previous application that started off in 2023. So just showing briefly for context, we can look at that later if it comes up as part of the discussion. So in terms of the application that members are seeing, I'm going to run it past you in two ways. One, just in the pure plan forms that we saw this morning, and then secondly, I'll put the each elevation against the current application, the current site position, so there's clear context of what's proposed and what's existing. In general terms, what you see in front of you is the white is the remaining part of the existing cottage that would survive should the development proceed. So in essence, on the north elevation, you've got this first floor extension above the existing lean-to that we saw when we were out on site. Then you've got the raising of the roof. You've got the glazed central section, which is something that could be done under the permitted development rights. In terms of the eastern elevation, you've got I'll go to the south elevation. The south elevation, you've basically got three gabled extensions running across the full width of that. And in terms of when we were stood and trying to look at it as it is viewed in terms of the side, it projects about 4.9 metres. So I've just dropped that measurement there as the maximum measurement. As you see, in terms of context, that's as wide or as wider than the existing gable. So just quickly going through the plans. This is the proposed ground floor plans and roof plans. So, as I said, we'd go through things in context. We're just going to show you the elevations as they stand at the minute and as they're proposed. So that's the existing elevation as it faces onto Sallyfield Lane. That's what the proposal would look like. In terms of the eastern side elevation, you've got the existing cottage there at the top, and then at the bottom you've got that's the outline of the existing building. Then you've got the first floor extension going on to Sallyfield Lane, and then you've got the extension that drops down to 4.9 metres again at the back. Again, that's the other side elevation, just showing how you've got the existing vernacular cottage on as it stands on the western elevation, and the proposal as you have it. And again, the 4.9 metres shown for clarity. And then finally, you've got the existing south elevation, and then you've got the proposals for the three gables and the increased roof height. So I've just put the red arrow there just to give a reference point. So the two blue arrows match up in terms of the height, and then the red arrow shows the the increase in height, which is 0.6 metres. In terms of the ground floor plans, again, you've got the existing single cottage there, and then that is now there, and then that in the darker print is the extensions. Similarly in terms of the first floor plans, and then the proposed roof plan. So, in terms of the consultations, there's a clear objection from the Conservation Officer on the basis that the scheme does not have a clear and convincing justification and has not been designed in a way that is sensitive to the special character of the conservation area. The proposal would cause harm and would not preserve the special character of the conservation area, and thus would not achieve the desirable objectives as required by the Planning and Listed Buildings Conservation Areas Act. In terms of publicity and consultation responses, the Parish Council provided no representations during the consultation process, so there's been nothing from residents. In terms of the ward members, Councillor Sankey called this application to committee. In terms of the relevant policies, as set out in the committee report, we look at the MPPF, the local plan, the design guide, parking SPD, Stanton Conservation Area appraisal. Right, so in terms of the material matters in front of members, in terms of any extension to a household or property, they can in principle be acceptable in positions outside settlement limits, but it depends on the rest of the criteria, of which of course residential amenity, highway safety and visual impacts are key. In terms of residential amenity, it's considered that the scheme has an acceptable relationship with existing properties and wouldn't give rise to overbearing, overshadowing or overlooking impacts. In terms of the highway safety, again, as we saw today, there's a driveway where there's plenty of car parking, so there's sufficient car parking space within the site. Now, members asked today about the extension and how we go about looking at it and our guidance. So in the design guidance SPD, when we're looking at extensions to buildings, I thought it would be useful to bring this paragraph to the committee. An extension can significantly alter the character and appearance of a building. The aim should be to create an extension which is sensitive to and harmonious with the original building. Extensions should not detract from the character of the building. The extension should be subservient to the original building in terms of its scale and its form. The visual integrity of the original building should not be compromised by the extension. So that's the design guidance that we work off. So, as set out in the officer report to committee, the clear view of officers is that the application is not modest nor subservient. Indeed, in terms of layman's terms, we would describe it as engulfing the existing modest property to the extent that you actually couldn't see what the original plan form would be. It's not subservient to the host dwelling house and results in a substantive extension and alteration of the existing relatively modest vernacular cottage, which we consider to be a local heritage asset in a conservation area location. And as a consequence of these works, with the ridge height and the substantive extensions, the visual impact of these works would be severely detrimental to the historic and architectural interest of this non-designated heritage asset, and would be to the severe detriment of the character and appearance of the streetscape of the conservation area. Accordingly, as per the officer report, the development is recommended for refusal, as officers consider it to be clearly unacceptable in terms of its impacts and be contrary to the policies SP1, SP24, SP25, DP1, DP3, DP5 and DP6. The design guide, of which I've just quoted a section from, the conservation area appraisal, which is set out in the officer report, and the relevant guidance set out in the MPPF. Consequently, the application is recommended for refusal.
Thank you. I have two speakers for this item, so if I can ask for John Imber to come up first, or would you like? All right, okay, yep. I'll allow that on this occasion, yeah. Councillor Sankey, if you...
May I start, Chair? Thank you very much, Chair, for inviting me here today. I'm not going to plan to talk about the technical aspects of the planning. I'll leave that to the experts and the agent. I'm talking about the community aspect of this particular application. This application, this is around Stanton, which is, as you hopefully have been this morning, it's a small hamlet village in the area, very close-knit community. This isn't about a developer buying a buying a rundown place, doing it up and selling it for a profit. This is about the community. This is a person who family lives in the village. He was born in the village. He's married in the village. He's got kids in the village. He's now living in a smaller house that he really needs, and he's looking to move into this one. So this is for somebody in the village to develop in that. So this is around the community aspects. I know this is not necessarily planning technical a bit, but I just want to put the context for you before the others speak. The other aspect is, and again, this is a sort of potentially a side issue, is looking at the village. There has been a number of planning applications that have gone through, and I've seen throughout that around about 16 different applications, some larger, some smaller than this, some less sensitive, some more sensitive than that, but there's been a significant number of developments in that village over recent years in that. But my argument is, Chair, that this is somebody who lives in the village, wants a larger property, we can debate on the size of that, for himself and his family, lives in the village and wants to do that. I've also been into the village, because it is in my ward, and talked to the people concerned, and I have not had a single person object to this application. Not one single person. In fact, I've had the opposite, which is, to be honest, for councillors who here, you know, that's slightly more of a rarity in my books, that people have actually said they want this to go ahead because they want the place, the rundown place to be done. So, in summary, Chair, may I say, it is for a local person who wants to have a larger house for his family. He's lived in the village all his life. His family lives there. It's not a developer. Other people have built their houses, extensions in that, and the village community wants it to succeed. I'll end on that and let the people who actually know what they're talking about in planning terms speak to you about that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If I can ask for John Imber to come forward in 3 minutes.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. The applicant has long ties to Stanton, having lived in the village for 53 years. The family has outgrown its current home in the centre of the village, and the proposals involve renovating and extending a property last occupied by his late grandfather to create a family home. This is a scheme motivated by desire to allow the family to remain in the village rather than one motivated by profit. The property currently stands vacant and is in need of substantial renovation to make it suitable for modern family life. The proposals would allow the property to be brought back into beneficial use and would free up the applicant's existing house for another young family to move into the village. The proposals have been well received locally, with neighbours expressing their support. The extension has been designed to be as environmentally friendly as possible and to be adaptable to fit the applicant's changing needs as they grow older. The application has attracted no objections other than that of the Conservation Officer. Case law requires that local planning authorities take all relevant material planning considerations into account when determining applications. The courts have established that the fallback position established by permitted development rights is a material planning consideration, provided that there is a more than simply theoretical prospect of the works being carried out. This is critical because the report before members today makes no reference to the fallback position established by permitted development rights. Members are therefore being asked to make their decision without taking a key material planning consideration into account. The applicant is committed to renovating and extending the property and has obtained a certificate of lawfulness from the council for alterations and extensions toward the road frontage, which is deemed the rear of the building for permitted development purposes. Building regulations approval has been granted and works on site have commenced. It's therefore clear that this fallback position has a more than theoretical prospect of being acted upon. The permitted development scheme would have a greater impact upon the character and appearance of the conservation area than the proposed scheme, because it's been designed to fit around the rules, resulting in a somewhat contrived and disjointed solution. It is against this baseline that the proposed scheme should be considered in terms of its scale and visual impact, rather than the current position as set out in the committee report. We would therefore encourage members to give weight to the fallback position established by permitted development rights and grant planning permission for the proposals so that the applicant and his family can remain in the village. Thank you for your time.
I think the planning officer just wants to respond before we open the floor up for debate.
Yes, Chair. There was a couple of points that hadn't been previously raised in the application process. Although, ironically, I did show everybody the slide of the certificate of lawfulness, so I made it absolutely clear what the permitted development rights are. So obviously I'm happy to show that again, which I'm showing in front of members. There was quite a lot of talk about local interest or local need. Can I just clarify two things? There's been no, as it correctly, there has been no letters of objection. There has also been no letters of support. So that's just a pure factual comment. There's been no correspondence from any local residents. Members were also asked to talk about and think about the local ties and the interest of the family at heart. In terms of planning law, there's quite a clear guidance on that, and in terms of that, there's planning permission. It's rare that planning permission should be granted on a personal basis, especially for permanent development. Not least for the simple fact that the development is there for all time, so therefore you're taking into account the material impact on the building itself and the conservation area. So I would just like to add that particular point. We could go quite along, I suppose, in terms of the debate, so I'll let members do that in terms of the nuances of fallback positions and whether somebody wants to implement it. But quite clearly that is the extent of any development that could actually take place. If I could put a slide on to the proposed scheme, I'll let members debate and judge that. I've got a clear view that that is not a better scheme than the fallback position, so that we're entitled to give that view as officers.
Thank you. Before we open the floor up for debate, one of the speakers was missed off the list. He's at the top of the list, sorry, missed off my sheet. Councillor Matthew Elias, sorry, if you want to come up in 3 minutes before we move further.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. I'm Matthew Elias. I'm a member of Stanton Parish Council, and I've been asked to attend today to speak on behalf of Stanton Parish Council, which unanimously supports the application. We have received, I can confirm we've received no objections whatsoever to the application as it stands. In fact, as Councillor Sankey indicated, quite the contrary, a lot of positive comments and residents wanting the property to be developed in this way to allow for a local family whose grandparents lived in the property to be able to remain in the village in a suitable property. It will tidy up a currently derelict building, and it'll bring back into use a cottage that's been a feature of the village for very many years, with modern convenience and making it suitable for occupation in today's times. The application is by a local family, as I've said, and that is what we're very keen to support. And we, the Parish Council, would wish the members to vote to pass this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the planning officer just wants to comment back in before we move forward.
Sorry, Chair, it's just a factual representation or comment. The parish council did not make any representations when consulted on this planning application. So obviously, again, this is new information to us on the day of the meeting.
Thank you for those comments. We don't have any further speakers on this item, so I will open the floor up for debate. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was going to actually raise the issue that although we've heard from both the ward councillor and the parish councillor that there is actually a lot of support for this application, we haven't actually seen any support in the report because the officers obviously haven't received any support. So I think that makes it a little bit difficult for us to take too much note of that because, you know, just hearing it as hearsay today. So I'm a bit concerned about that, but I'm also a little bit confused. The conservation officer has said, and it's quoted in the report, that this scheme doesn't have a clear and convincing justification, and it says it would not preserve the special character of the conservation area and thus would not achieve the desirable objective as described within section 66 and 72 of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Act. And then Alan slightly confused me because is there a way that the conservation officer has worked or tried to work with the applicants so that we have something that is acceptable within those terms there? I'm not quite sure whether you've told me that already, Alan. I'm sorry, but perhaps you could answer that so I understand.
I think to go back to the slide I already showed you earlier, and I said I'd touch upon it. There's a lot. There's obviously this application's in front of members today. This goes back a long way. This the development or proposals go back quite a way on this application site. So in 2023, there was an original application made, which is in front of you, which you'll see is very similar. So we were asked by the local member concerned to try and engage with the applicant or the applicant's agent to come up with a scheme that's so the scheme in front of you was their basic or final offer at that time, which was the end of that process in February 2025, and the application was withdrawn. So as you see, it's the only difference is actually between the two. So this is basically what the applicant wanted. This was their final offer at the time. And as you'll see, that the only difference really between the schemes is that in terms of the elevation on the back, that one there, the Sallyfield Lane one, is that the lean-to was kept on that 2025 scheme or the 2023 scheme, and actually now they've actually put a bigger scheme in because there's now a two-storey extension above that. So I've actually gone right to the end of the thing. So I've put them against each other there. So that was a withdrawn scheme when officers said that we were going to recommend that for refusal, and then the applications come in again, and the only difference is the change. So I mean, the applicant was here, all the agents here, they can confirm. I'm quite sure that this is the scale of the development they want, and they want it to be determined because this is what they consistently provide to us. So it's not the case that we haven't sought to engage to reduce the scale of the development. So I guess at the end of the day, that's what you've been presented with, a case today that the applicant needs this scale of development for his needs. What we've got to do is balance. We have the planning, obviously, balance as well to take.
Thank you. Do we have any further speakers on the item? Councillor Whittaker.
It's quite easy to cloud the two sides because it's very intuitive that we're being told it's somewhere in the village. They want to stay in the village and release another house, which you're not going to argue against that. But we're sitting here as the planning committee, and we can't judge it on that. We've got to judge it on what's in front of us, and guidance we get from the Conservation Officer and our planners. The Conservation Officer, obviously, it's in a conservation area for a reason. The reason being that you've got to conform to certain things. And one of them is, obviously, it's got to be a modest extension and it shouldn't affect the integrity of the village. But looking at that and looking at those plans, I think it's very hard to argue that it doesn't affect the integrity of the village, and it's by no means modest. And if there's no dialogue being taken with the planners to actually reduce it at this point to make it, I don't feel I can support it in its present form.
Thank you. Councillor Slater.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have sympathy with the notion of a conservation area, and that everyone should submit to the rules of that area if that's the case. But I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I do struggle to see what harm this particular development would cause. On the way out of from the site this morning, we drove past into Stanton Village itself, or the bigger part of it rather. There were, to our left, ladies and gentlemen, there were plenty of 1930s, 1940s houses that have been built since the original village was started. Yes, they've been done very nicely. They've been cladded with stone on the outside, but in no way were they anything similar to the original building that would have been this application. So I do wonder. I'd really like a conversation policy that gave us scope to sort of make adjustments like this to allow this kind of development, because it doesn't seem to me that it causes particular harm to anybody. Certainly, no one's supported it, but no one's objected to it. They're not here, are they, objecting to it? I can't see who would be offended by this building. The ridge height seemed very similar, if not less, than the ridge height of the building next to it. So I'm in a quandary really as to what to do, because it doesn't seem to me that this is, in the scheme of things, this is something that's causing a great deal of harm, but it does go against the conservation policy. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Councillor George.
Yeah. Did I hear you say, Alan, it's a non-designated heritage asset, which means we've got to be particularly cautious about what we're doing with a heritage asset? Oh.
I think Laura will explain to you, to give you a clear view on what in terms of designations and assets.
Yes, so at the moment the council doesn't have a local list which would very clearly define certain buildings as being non-designated heritage assets, which means they don't carry as strong protection as listed buildings, but they do carry still some protection, especially within our local plan policy. So we have a policy for them. Oh, sorry, I'm Laura Wigg-Bailey, I'm the Conservation Officer. But this particular building, we can sort of fairly confidently say that it is a non-designated heritage asset to the conservation area and to the borough as a borough-wide, because it is specifically named in the conservation area appraisal. And at the moment, without a agreed local list, that's all we have to identify locally, essentially, buildings of a quality that would be locally listed. So if we did have a local list, this is one that would be first on the list for Stanton to go on that more sort of formalised list. Does that answer the question about non-designated? Can I say something to the character and to the harm? Is that okay? To Councillor Slater's point about why this particular building contributes so strongly and why it's been named specifically in the conservation area appraisal, is because its character, although it has been adapted, we noticed today that there's been changes, been extended, there's bits and bobs here and there, and it might not seem particularly attractive, but it's a very good example of what is a key characteristic of Stanton, which is the way it's positioned on the road in terms of its alignment, not dead on to the road, but at an angle, and the way it has a blind elevation at the back, so what we call the street facing, the northern elevation, would have been blind originally, no windows in it at all, and that's very consistent with the character of Stanton. So if you start eroding these little details, then the character gradually, by degrees, becomes eroded. Those buildings that you were referring to, that modern development, they are mentioned in the conservation area appraisal as being negative detractors from the character, the character, the special character. So you've highlighted them. They're identified in the appraisal as being negative to the purity, essentially, of the conservation area. Yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Councillor Slater.
Yes, thank you very much for that explanation. Yeah. So in effect, then the conservation area battle has been lost, hasn't it? Because those buildings are there now, the ones we've just talked about. So I'm sorry, we've missed the opportunity, haven't we, to conserve what we wanted to, and we're now left with forgive me, a rundown building which yes, it can be restored within conservation lines to a point, but equally it could be left. Forgive me, I'm not saying anyone's going to do this, but it could be left to disintegrate even further, couldn't it? And it could just be left to crumble into the ground, and then we've lost a residence. I mean, that's my position, really. But I appreciate the problem you've got there, but it does seem as it still seems to me as though we're not achieving a great deal by not letting this be developed. We're really not. But anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you very much for your explanation, by the way. Thank you.
Councillor George.
Yeah, just following on from that then, that's quite a substantial extension we've got on that cottage. So the character of that cottage, from what I can see from the pictures and from being out this morning, is going to change drastically. So what you're saying is you're losing all the initial details of what would be something, quite important and quirky, if you like, that we're never going to get back. And from those drawings, it's just considerably different. You might as well, knock it down and rebuild. And that's not what we want to do, is it? So I'm struggling to approve, if I'm honest. Okay.
Councillor Jones.
If we take the argument to its extreme, we'll end up with no heritage left anywhere, will we? There won't be anything that will be of value to us in terms of heritage if we say that just because it's there and we can do something that effectively looks like it's been knocked down and rebuilt. Do we end up with any heritage worth protecting?
Thank you. Do I have any further speakers? Councillor McKinnon.
So if we refuse it today, as the officers recommend, what are the residents allowed to do? Would they allow to go ahead with the 2023 on to permitted development?
To answer the question, Councillor, they could just go ahead, and I think this is a point that keeps coming up, is that, and to answer Councillor Slater's issue, they've got to they can start it in 2024 in terms of the restoration and reuse of that building. If the application is refused, then they can also come back to us and negotiate for a modest scheme, because nobody wishes any property to go vacant. Officers are always keen to engage constructively. We're in a position, because our hands are forced to, that we've been asked to determine this application on its own merits. It's been brought to committee on that basis. So if it's refused, then the applicants have two choices. They can come back to the table and come back with something and talks about the modesty and the reflects the character more, or they can appeal against any refusal and test that appeal. That's what they're entitled to do.
So I'm still a bit confused. So what would they be allowed to build?
But they'd be allowed to build without applying for a planning permission to us. They can build that without under committee development, that's correct.
And is there any difference in the number of bedrooms?
Oh yes, I mean they want a 4-bedroom house, so that's what all those extensions that you've been seeing are proposed for.
What you've got there, the certificate of lawfulness.
No, that's a much more modest scheme, isn't it?
I can't really tell from here. So how many bedrooms
Right. Well,
has that got?
if we go back and compare it again, all you've got with the extensions on here is you've got a glazed conservatory, so you're not going to get a bedroom out of that. And then there's a single-storey addition there, and then there's some roof lights in the roof, and this is all that relate to the existing cottage, so there's no increase in the height of the building. But this is what they could do without an application for planning permission. That's what they're proposing, which is considerably different, as we can all see. So they can't do that without permission. That's why they've made the application to committee, and it's come to committee.
Yeah, thank you. Now you've explained it, I can see the difference.
Councillor Whittaker.
Can I just ask if the fallback position is acceptable from the Conservation Officer?
Is that okay? No, not at all. My problem is this distinction between the principal elevation and the frontage and the street scene. So in a conservation area, you can't impact the character of the principal elevation, but in this particular case, because a lot of the houses in Stanton face into the fields because of how they were designed and how their purpose was to face into the countryside and the farms that they were for. That's why we've got this situation where they can do pretty much, well, they can do this to the elevation that you can see from the conservation, that's the most impactful to the conservation area. But they're a bit more restricted on what they can do to the rear, which is essentially the principal elevation. That's why Alan took so much time to explain that when we were on site. And that's just a sort of quirk of the Conservation, the Planning Act, Land Listed Building and Conservation Areas Planning Act. But yeah, so if it were down to me, I would object to anything that really changes that elevation that shows into the conservation area, just because it's so characterful and so much sort of what the Stanton Conservation Area is all about. These buildings that turn their back to the road, essentially. But you know, I am a reasonable person, and I'm always willing to compromise and work with applicants and agents.
Councillor Whittaker.
So what you're saying is your position as a conservation officer is compromised by the certificate of lawfulness anyway? Yeah. So that's where we are, whether it's accept the new proposals or go with the other and hope there can be some dialogue to minimise the size of the development. So I'm in a quandary now.
Thank you. Do we have any further speakers on the item? Thank you, members. So we don't have any further speakers on the item. So just to summarise, obviously, what's been said. So the applications, obviously, for substantial extensions and alterations to Borough Cottage, including raising the ridge height and the 2-storey rear extension, single-storey and first floor front extensions. The officer's recommendation before us is to refuse the application. So the central issues obviously before us is the heritage 17th, 18th century dwelling, non-designated heritage asset forming part of an important visual cluster within the Stanton Conservation Area. So the conservation area's officers objected, and officers consider the cumulative effect of the proposals that's going to double the size of the dwelling. So based on the debate we've had as well. Do I have an indication from members to go with the officer's recommendation for refusal? Do I have a proposer? Councillor Whittaker. All right.
Yeah. Can I just say, I'm pleased we've actually got our conservation officer here today to help us through this one, because it is a bit of a minefield. And while I sympathise with, I think, Constantin regarding wanting to keep people in the village, I feel as a planning committee, we should follow the officer's recommendation and vote for this refusal.
Thank you. And Councillor Jones, are you wishing to second?
Yeah, I certainly second that, Chair, and I would really like to encourage the applicants to get involved in discussions with our conservation area officer to come up with something that's really acceptable, because I'm sure she would be quite helpful in that.
Thank you. So we've got a proposer and a seconder for the officer's recommendation for refusal. So all those in favour for the officer's recommendation for refusal? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. So due to the voting, the application has been refused. If any member of the public would like to leave at this point, they may do so before we move on to the next application. Thank you. We'll move on to the third application for today. That's application P2025-00009. The application for the erection of 4 holiday lodges with associated drop-off parking spaces and landscaping. The site address is Branston Golf Club, Burton-on-Trent, Branston, DE143DP. I'll pass over to the planning officer to present the case.
Thank you, Chair. So, as the Chair just mentioned, it's for the erection of 4 holiday lodges with associated drop-off parking spaces and landscaping. Originally, 5 lodges were proposed. This was negotiated down during the course of the application to 4, and their layout was amended along with some additional information provided in the form of a parking survey. So the application site is shown on the plan in front of you with the black line. To the north of the site is the cricket club here. This is the driving range for the golf club. Residential development to the west of the site, and you can see the access into the site off Faldo Close, which comes down this way and then leads down to the main golf course, where there is a further 2 car parks, a smaller car park and the main car park. Members will also see we looked at a bund on site this morning. That's shown in this sort of brown colour along here, and you can see that does continue to the north and to the south, and then runs along the south of the dwellings that are adjacent to the site. That bund forms the flood defences, with the River Trent being situated to the south beyond the golf course. So that's just slightly more zoomed out. You can see the main golf course buildings here. A smaller car park is situated here, and this rectangular area is the main car park serving the site. And that's just a Google Earth image. This is the car park that we visited this morning, with the residential development here and the main buildings. That's the main golf course building and the pavilion, with the main car park and the smaller car park situated here. So just some images of the existing car parking area, as members will have seen it today, and photographs of the existing access road. So that one is coming into the site from Feldo Close into the golf course with the access to the site on the left. And this is exiting, so this is the access to the car park exiting towards Feldo Close. And this indicates photographs of the neighbouring dwellings from the application site. So this was taken from near the gateway to the site and the others from within the car park and along the access road. These images are just to show the pathways to the main golf course buildings and the rear car park. So the proposals comprise of 4 lodges, which are shown on this plan here within the red line, with 5 drop-off parking spaces. The flood defence bund is shown with these dashed lines across here, and it does back onto sort of an area of woodland. And this plan also shows the relationship of those proposed lodges to the neighbouring properties that are along Fairway and Feldo Close. So this indicates the landscaping plan. The members did ask a query this morning in respect of trees, so I've tried to highlight that on this slide. So the purple starred trees, which are these ones, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are new planted trees. The red starred ones, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, those ones are retained trees within the site. There was a typo in paragraph 14.7 of the committee report as it refers to 3 trees to be removed. The trees to be removed are all outside of the site, but there are 4 and they're shown in these purple areas. So 1, 2, 3, and the 4th one is really tiny up here, but they are all outside of the application site and they are not protected in any way. So planning permission or any form of consent wouldn't be required for their removal. So again, we can see the bund shown in the blue line on this plan here with the proposed holiday lodges cited and the relationship with those to the dwellings. So these dwellings here face rearwards onto the site. This dwelling is sideways on and the dwelling in front of it is also sideways on. That's just off the plan. The holiday lodges are an A-frame design, so reducing the overall bulk of the development by reducing the first floor element. They're raised off the ground by approximately 0.88 metres and would have a decked area to provide some private outdoor space for any future users. This image indicates plots 1, 2 and 4. Plot 3 is very similar, it's just handed, so it's mirrored. And again, this shows plots 1, 2 and 4 with plot 3 being handed. And it just shows that there's an open plan living space within the lodges. There's a bedroom, bathroom, and then 2 bedrooms at first floor. And the cross sections indicate how the lodges would be raised above the ground. And you can see it on here. So this slide indicates the neighbouring properties a little bit more clearly than members saw on the board this morning and here. So this top cross sections looking northwest through the site and the bottom cross section will be looking southwest through the site. In terms of consultation responses, the Highway Authority have no objections subject to a condition for the parking and turning areas to be provided prior to first use. The flood risk team have no comments to make and the Environment Agency has no objection to the amended proposals subject to a condition in respect of the finished floor levels. Severn Trent Water have no objection subject to a drainage condition and the area is below the threshold for National Forest planting, so they've not raised any concerns. Staff's Police Architectural Liaison Officer has not responded to the consultations. Nature Space has no objection subject to a condition which requires compliance with the precautionary method statement that was submitted during the course of the application. The Environmental Health team have no objection subject to conditions relating to a construction method statement and contaminated land. The ecologist has no objection subject to conditions relating to BNG, nesting birds and a lighting strategy. The tree officer has no objection subject to the drawings that as part of the application and the arboricultural report being included in the approved plans list. And the East Staff's waste team have confirmed that they have no comments to make on the application. Branston Parish Council have objected and raised concerns due to a number of residents approaching them. Concern was also raised about the fencing by the driving range. and Ward Member Councillor Clark requested that the application be determined by Planning Committee and raised concerns from local residents in relation to parking, lighting and noise. So in relation to the original consultation, there were 16 objections. These were in relation to the principle of the development, the local area not having facilities to sustain a holiday of development, and in terms of residential amenity, the proximity to neighbours, overlooking and loss of privacy, noise impacts and lack of overnight management from the main golf club. Traffic impacts include the condition of the access road and narrowness of it, lack of allocated parking, lack of access to the wider site and impact on surrounding roads. In terms of flooding, comments were received to say that the site's regularly flooded and is a floodplain, and additional hard standing will impact on natural drainage, although I would comment there isn't any additional hard standing proposed over and above the existing use as a car park. Pollution and contamination issues are raised in terms of light, noise and air pollution, and concerns were raised in terms of damage to surrounding trees and wildlife. Other matters were raised, which included suitable fencing to the cricket club boundary, impact on health and well-being, and it not being clear how this is financially viable or would bring any benefit to the local economy. Following a reconsultation, this was when the amended drawings were received to reduce the number of lodges within the site. We received 15 objections. I think, as stated in the report, some of those were from people who had already commented, but there were a few new objectors contained within them as well. So they raised concerns about residential amenity in terms of the revised orientation of the lodges not addressing the previous concerns about overlooking and loss of privacy, and that conditions should be imposed if the development were allowed to limit the number of guests, restrict late night noise, require a noise management plan, restrict the use of outdoor spaces, prohibit amplified music, fire pits and hot tubs. Further concerns were raised in terms of highways. The traffic survey submitted was based on 1 week in June and they didn't feel it was representative. School minibuses use the car park to drop off pupils, and a danger to the users of the lodges from speeding vehicles using the access road. In terms of flooding and drainage, some comments were received to say that if the lodges are raised anyway, they could be built elsewhere within the site, and the concern of a precedent being set for future development. And other matters, again, were the economic reasons for siting rather than the site constraints, lack of justification for inability to use other locations, no confidence that the lodges will be operated in a way which will protect neighbours, no details as to how unauthorised occupancy will be addressed, and lack of engagement by the applicant with local residents and lack of on-site security outside of normal operating hours. The policies used in determining the application are the MPPF, the ESBC local plan, the design guide, parking standards SPD, separation distances and amenity SPD, and Branston neighbourhood plan. So in terms of my assessment, the principle of development is considered to be acceptable, being situated within a settlement boundary and to support an existing business. On balance, this would offer a suitable form of sustainable development, which is within an area in settlement where development would usually be expected as per the policies in the local plan. In terms of design and character on the area, the design and form being an A-frame structure reduces the overall bulk of the built form, giving a simple tent-like appearance, distinguishing them from the residential properties adjacent. The use of timber cladding is considered acceptable given the backdrop against a woodland area, and the development offers a suitable siting, density and design for its setting that will not harm the character and appearance of the area. In terms of residential amenity, the proposals are considered to be acceptable in terms of separation distances to residents, and the proposals would result in no significant overlooking or loss of privacy, which would warrant refusal. There would be no overlooking between the proposed lodges, and no noise issues have been raised. However, a condition is recommended for an operational management plan. Sorry, where I've said no noise issues have been raised, that's by the environmental health team. In terms of highway matters, the Highway Authority have raised no objections to the proposals, including the additional traffic management plan, the parking survey, and confirm that there is sufficient capacity within the other existing car parks in the site to accommodate the transferred demand associated with the development. The proposals are not considered to result in a severe impact on the capacity of the local highway network, and as such are considered acceptable. In respect of flood risk and drainage, the site is located in flood zones 2 and 3, but benefits from flood defences which are immediately adjacent to the site in the form of the bund that we saw this morning. The sequential and exception tests were accepted, and the applicant has considered alternate locations within the wider site which would be at a higher risk of flooding due to the lack of flood defences. The Environment Agency have no objections subject to a condition in respect of the finished floor levels, and the lead local flood authority have no comments to make in terms of surface water flooding. Severn Trent, however, have recommended a drainage condition. In respect of pollution and contamination, given the use of the site as a car park, there is the potential for contaminants, and therefore a condition is recommended to secure any necessary remediation measures. Whilst the environmental health team have raised no objections in terms of noise, an operational management plan is considered to be necessary given the comments of local residents, and that has been added as a condition. In relation to ecology and biodiversity, the BNG metric demonstrates a 19.10% net gain on site and within the wider site, so that would be split between the red line and land that's in the blue line in the applicant's control, which can be secured by the mandatory condition. Conditions in relation to a precautionary working method statement and ecological enhancement measures and bird nesting season, that's to make sure works take place outside of bird nesting season, along with a lighting strategy, will ensure that protected species are not adversely impacted. Trees within the site would be retained, as we've seen on the previous slide, and it would be 4 trees that's taken from the report, but it is 4 trees would be removed. These are outside of the site boundary and are not protected. 5 new trees would be planted within the application site, as we saw on the previous slide, which is considered to be acceptable. In conclusion, the proposal complies with the local plan, Branston Neighbourhood Plan, Parking Standards SPD, the Design Guide SPD, the Separation Distance and Amenity SPD and the MPPF, and the recommendation therefore is to approve with conditions as per the report and update sheet. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I've got 3 speakers on this item, so if I can ask for the first member, Trudy Hanson, to come forward, please.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm resident on the corner of Langer Close and Fairway. I'd like to object to the proposed development of woodland lodges at Branston Golf and Country Club. I understand that the club wishes to expand its business, but the height and the siting of the lodges would result in an unacceptable overlooking of neighbouring properties. The proposed mitigation through screening would only be seasonal and would not provide adequate year-round protection for local properties. The lodges are large enough to accommodate groups, including multiple couples attending evening functions and golfing events. With no late-night on-site staffing, there would be no effective mechanism to manage overnight disturbances. Any issues would therefore fall to nearby residents and ultimately the council itself to deal with. Increased pedestrian and vehicle movements late in the evening are likely, particularly as guests return to their lodges after club functions and weddings. Concerns about noise are supported by evidence from other local authorities, including the City of York, which in its noise abatement policy recognises that holiday accommodation can alter guest behaviour. They've put in place noise enforcement patrols. Given the site's elevated and prominent position, external lighting would be highly visible from surrounding homes. Additional lighting to address pedestrian safety would further increase light pollution and adversely affect both residents and the local wildlife, while insufficient lighting would raise safety concerns and potentially force pedestrians onto the narrow access road around the club. New development should avoid adverse impact on the local environment and road safety. This proposal, however, reduces on-site parking while increasing traffic, placing additional pressure on nearby residential streets. The lodges would be located approximately 113 metres from the Fairway and Faldo Close junction, meaning that street parking would be significantly closer than the main car park. This means that there's a good chance that local people and people displaced from the car park were likely to park on the local streets. We already have issues with accidents on the Faldo Close Fairway junction, and we feel that this might actually increase. with limited evidence of inappropriate way, which effectively reduces the road to a single lane near the Faldo Close junction. Faldo Close was never designed as the primary access point for the club, and continued expansion has exacerbated traffic, safety and condition issues. Removing one lodge from the proposal has minimal effect on cumulative impacts on noise, light and traffic, which remain unacceptable. There's no effective or enforceable mitigation or management strategy. This proposal therefore conflicts with Strategy Policy 1, detailed Policies 1 and 7 of the local plan, and I and my neighbours respect is refused. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can ask for David Blanks to come forward, please. I think the mic's been left on, so if you just turn it off and back on when you...
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Branston. I live less than 30 metres from Branston Golf Club's putting practice green, its paddle tennis court, golf facility. All of these requiring frequent and prolonged use of mowers, leaf blowers, etc. for their maintenance. And I am concerned about the added noise that will inevitably come from the site of the proposed holiday lodges. Noise during construction, from landscaping maintenance and when the guests arrive. People in holiday lodges will be in holiday mode. Some of them will have been drinking as they sit outside on warm nights or while making their way to or from the golf club house and pavilion. Their voices will carry, as currently do the excited shouts of players on the aforementioned tennis courts and the thwacking of tennis balls almost without respite from 7 AM in summer until 9 PM. And any signs requesting patrons to consider local residents will likely go unnoticed or be ignored. From my living room during the day, I will hear strimmers and yet more mowing and leaf blowing, and from my bedroom at night, I will hear those raised voices. How much worse for residents closer to the site? All this on top of the revving and backfiring of massed motorbikes and muscle cars at certain rallying events that occasionally take place in the main car park, and the wedding celebrations with associated drumming. I understand that some noises are unavoidable, such as the building of the flood defence wall, which is not down to the golf club, is unavoidable, but it has to be accepted. But you can have too much of a bad thing. Then there is the lighting, or rather the flood lighting that the site will require. As it is, the lights along the slip road or access road leading to the golf club house are on all night. Combined with those on the tennis courts and adventure golf facility, which are supposed to switch off automatically at 9 PM but don't always do so, they are highly invasive, reflecting off the surrounding trees and into people's homes and creating such an ambient glow that you might think a football stadium was there. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. If you can just turn the mic off, please. If I could ask for Claire Preston to come forward, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. Branston Golf and Country Club is recognised as one of the top golf clubs in the Midlands. The associated health, leisure, conference and event facilities are highly successful and cater for a wide range of members and visitors. Over recent years, there's been significant investment and improvements to the overall experience at the club, which has led to the creation of jobs, a boost of member numbers and an increase in visitors to the area. However, one key area where the club is currently lacking is the provision of high-quality visitor accommodation, and this proposal has been designed to meet this need. The application site comprises a car park as previously developed land situated within the settlement boundary for Burton-on-Trent. Planning was first sought for 5 holiday lodges. However, this was reduced to 4 holiday lodges with the site layout amended accordingly. The form of the lodges is quite simple. The A-frame design provides the space required internally, whilst the tapered upper section reduces their massing and scale. The lodges are well related to the use proposed, with a timber-clad finish to help assimilate with the surroundings. Your officer has determined there would be no significant adverse impact to the visual amenities of the area. The submitted parking appraisal confirms there is sufficient capacity within the existing main car park to accommodate the loss of parking spaces at the application site. The Highway Authority has no objections in terms of highway safety. There are no objections from the Environment Agency or lead local flood authority in terms of flood risk to the site, and the finished floor levels for the lodges has been secured via a suitably worded planning condition. As stated in your officer's report, given the distance of the application site to nearby dwellings, there will be no breach of council amenity guidelines or noise implications. The submitted landscaping scheme will enhance the existing landscaping strip and provide further screening to the site to give a woodland feel to the setting of the lodges. The applicant has agreed to a use restriction for short-term holiday accommodation only and has agreed to a planning condition securing an operational management plan to safeguard residential amenity. The proposals do not impact any priority habitats in terms of and in terms of biodiversity net gain, the proposals can deliver well over the statutory 10% net gain required. The proposal will safeguard jobs and result in improved job opportunities at the club, which in turn supports the economy of the town. These significant social and economic benefits associated with the proposal are strongly supported by local and national planning policies. There are no outstanding material planning considerations, and as such, we would therefore encourage members to approve the scheme in line with officer's recommendation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I have no further speakers on this item, so I'll now open the floor up for debate for committee members. Councillor George.
Just a couple of things I've picked up there. Parking seems to be an issue, but from what I understand this morning, the 5 places marked on that map are only drop-off points. The people using these holiday lodges should be parking it in the main car park once they've arrived and you know, unpacked. Another issue that's been picked up is lighting. Is there any way we can look at some sensitive lighting somehow? There was mention from the the Branston Parish Council about fencing. Can you just run through the fencing, please? And danger to users regarding speeding vehicles. I know Branston's got a load of footpaths. Can you just highlight the footpaths just to show that people aren't going to be walking in the road and on the footpaths, please? And maybe signage, although it might or might not help, just to say be respectful of the residents. Could we consider that?
Lisa, did you want to come in before we go further?
Okay, so if I start with the parking, yes, they are intending to use the 5 spaces within the site as a drop-off point and then for users to park within the wider golf course site. There are pathways leading to the site. I don't know if I've got... If I go back, it's a little difficult to see for the tree cover, but there are paths that come under these trees and around. There's a area just in front of the driving range. It's not a formal path, but it does get you off of the access road to walk around. And then there is another formal path which comes all the way down here. So you can walk from the application site round these pathways to get down to the main golf course. So there's a car park here that would be retained, and then the main car park is this area here. So yes, those 5 parking spaces are for drop-off purposes only. In terms of lighting, there is a condition recommended. Let me just find it. Yeah, so condition 18 recommends a lighting strategy. That was really in the interest of protected species, but we could potentially amend the wording to include residents. So there is a condition for that. The fencing point that you raised was in terms of, so the comments that I received were in terms of this boundary here, because of the cricket club. They do have a fairly tall fence, which looks to me to be about 3 metres in height, but I'd need to check the planning history. But it's more to do with the boundary of the site and cricket balls not entering the site from the cricket use along that boundary. Speeding vehicles, I think, was the next one. I put vehicles, that's why I was a bit... that was a concern raised by residents in terms of the access to the site, so the access along Faldo Close, and it was more to do with following the amended scheme, the impact of users of the holiday lodges being impacted by the vehicles that come along that access way, because it's quite narrow. And then signage, yes, if you wanted to add an informative or a condition in that respect, then that's up. Yeah, so we could take a vote on that in a bit.
Councillor Jones, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. Probably fairly similar issues. The parking on the site is for drop-off only. Why is that? Would that not resolve some of the queries that we've had if that was actually allowed to be permanent parking for the users of, or for the rent at the site? I'm not quite sure why you have to have the parking further down, you know, which is a little way down to the main clubhouse. That's the first of my questions. I don't know if do you want to just deal
Shall
with
I respond to
yeah,
that
sure.
one? So the applicant were the ones that requested the drop-off parking area. It's not something that we'd requested, but equally it's shown on the approved plans, but it's not. We've not secured it by condition to be drop-off only. So it could be used. It's just the number. I suppose it's the number of users within each lodge, because there's a potential for there's 4 lodges and there's potential for more vehicles than that. So it would be on a first come first served basis.
Okay, they've got 5 at least. I think there are at least 5 parking spaces there, and I would have thought that might relieve some of the problems and some of the concerns that the residents have got about people walking up and backwards and parking. And quite a lot of the objections seem to be about the current activities and breaches of conditions, and I don't know if perhaps we need to have a look at what's going on there, because quite a lot of the noise and things must be for the events that they have at Branston Golf Club now, rather than what's going to be created by what is actually an extra four properties there. And I don't know if there's something we can have a look at doing something with that.
So the noise issues that were raised during the course of the application were flagged with the environmental health team, but they didn't raise any objections to it. We can flag it with them again, but generally we are reliant on occupiers, neighbouring occupiers, on letting us know if there's a problem. So it may be something that the environmental health team need to investigate by way of statutory nuisance.
Okay, perhaps you could actually raise that with them, because that seems to be some part of people's concerns, really. And just my final point was the highways, the concern about speeding vehicles and the access to the site. Is the highways objection, or sorry, the highways have no objection, and is that just to the access to the site rather than across the whole site? Is your area of concern really just access along Faldo Road and to the start of the site rather than anything further? Because I don't know how you feel about when they have events on there, when you are going to be having quite a lot more traffic going there than 4 extra places are going to generate.
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of, it's difficult to point on a plan, but to mention, I wasn't obviously there when you did your site visit this morning, but as you turned off the main north-south route, turned left to go towards the golf club, on the corner there, I don't know if it was there on this morning, Severn Trent were doing some works in that little turning head. They got some tankers when I did my last site visit just after 1 o'clock this afternoon. So that turning head where those tankers were doing the works when you did your site visit is the extent of public highway. That's as far as it goes. After that, it's a private road. So from our perspective, when we're reviewing the planning application, we review what would be the impact on the public highway, and obviously the public highway ends where that Severn Trent were doing those works this morning when you went and had a look at your site. So from our perspective, as I say, I went just after 1 o'clock just to refresh my memory again this afternoon. I've driven down that internal road, which is private. Cars passed me. I had no problem passing other vehicles going in the opposite direction down that internal road. there's obviously still car parks available down there with the loss of this small one. And I'll just touch on, I know it's not part of your question, but I'll just touch on in case it becomes a secondary question. Obviously, the applicant and the consultant have done a parking survey in June, which in my opinion isn't a bad month. It's not in the middle of the depths of winter. You know, more people will be out in the summer months. They have shown there is spare capacity within the site if that car park was lost to put the lodges on. And obviously the distance between our extent of public highway and those other car parks is significant. So from a highway authority perspective, it's not on our land that we control, it's some distance away from it, the car parks that remain. And in terms of speeding, obviously it's a private road. From memory, when I drove down there a couple of hours ago, I think there was a signed speed limit of 10 miles an hour when I drove down a couple of hours ago from memory. Obviously we can't enforce that because it's not our road, it would be down to the golf club too. And just to mention again what's been picked up in terms of accidents on our network, so that's Falzo Close heading north back up towards the main road. We haven't got any accidents listed in the last 4 or 5 years that are recorded by Staffordshire Police, and that's what we have to go on. Not a fender bender that somebody physically saw, it's something that is recorded by Staffordshire Police. So in summary, forgive me, it's a long answer to a question, but in summary, the site is some distance away from the public highway, so therefore we don't see it has an effect to a public highway. The addition of 4 lodges generates minimal traffic on its own. You're here to consider 4 lodges. That generates very little additional traffic. We don't have an accident problem as of what Staffordshire Police are telling us, so therefore our reply back to the planning office is we don't see a technical reason using the powers within National Planning Policy Framework to object.
Thank you. So this is another issue that it's really up to the club to manage any traffic that might be causing a problem for local residents, any speeding around that's once it's onto the private land and everything. That's really up to the club themselves to be managing and looking after. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Smedley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just a little concerned about the any noise issue for the local residents. I think we mentioned this morning there's no furniture on the decking. Is that correct?
There's nothing shown on the plans, but if members were minded to do so, you could add a condition to restrict any additional paraphernalia being added to the decking.
And also hot tubs, there's nothing mentioned about hot tubs, but in the future that potentially could be an issue. Could we condition that as well? Or?
Yes, it could be added on as a restriction if you were minded to do so. Can I just also address something that I think it was Councillor James was talking about, the operational management of the site. We have also got a condition 11 for an operational management plan, which we were minded to add on due to noise issues raised by neighbours. So that is that prior to the first use of the lodges, details of an operational management plan shall be submitted to and approved in writing. The plan shall include details of how the holiday lodges will be managed outside of the golf club's opening hours. But if you were minded to, you could add an informative to advise what details you would expect to see in that management plan. Or you could amend the condition, yeah.
Just outside the operational hours, it sounds to me as if there needs to be some more management within the operational hours as well, if you follow that.
I do follow you, but the majority of objections that I received were about the lack of people, the lack of security on site outside of the normal operational hours and noise from sort of late night events and things. So, but if members were minded to do so, you could make amendments to that condition.
Thank you. Do I have any other speakers, any further speakers on this item? Councillor Whittaker.
Just to ask, is there a standard condition with holiday cottages for the length of stay?
Yes, there is. I believe it is within there in the use restriction. Condition 20.
Thank you. Do I have any further speakers on this item? Thank you. So I've got indication of a couple of conditions and informative. So Councillor George, just to clarify, it was the informative for extra signage.
Yes, please.
Was
just
that
to say,
correct?
please, you know,
Yeah.
be respectful of your
Yeah.
residents when leaving.
That's fine. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Jones. All those in favour for that informative? That's unanimous. Thank you. So, Councillor Smedley, you wanted a condition putting in for no furniture outside, is that correct? Yep.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. And also the hot tub.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of the future. Should they, going forward, consider the options of hot tubs, which I know can be incredibly noisy of an evening.
I'll just let the...
Could I just ask the councillor if she would separate those two things? Like one being hot tubs and another one being chairs and furniture to vote on?
Yes, Councillor, I was going to say actually, because they have shown decking area, so you know, sitting out on decking area would be reasonable activity for such use. But I think we need to differentiate between kind of usual outside use, sitting outside, etc., to some of the things that the members that of the audience that we've heard, which were hot tubs, and I think in the written objections it was fire pits.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those kind of things. So if we could separate those out, I think that would be helpful.
Yes, I was just thinking of, like, obviously people in holiday mood, that's all, and, you know, I've done it myself, but they are quite close to, you know, residential properties. That's my point, really.
Councillor Smedley, an alternative that we might want to consider is amending the operational management plan condition, which is condition 11, thanks Lisa, to be specific about how the occupiers are going to manage outdoor noise, and that might cover those concerns that you've raised.
So are you happy with that proposal? Yep. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Jones. So all those in favour of that? Thank you, that's unanimous. So I don't have any further conditions or informatives to add. So
Claire, I would like the officers to have a look at the operational management plan for the issues that I and the residents have raised, and have a look and see if they need to tighten any of those up.
Were those specifically about noise?
About the noise, yeah, yes, and that
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, so I have no further speakers on the item. So moving forward, obviously we've got the application before us seeking permission for 4 holiday lodges. So can I see a proposer for the officer's recommendation for approval, including the restrictions and conditions mentioned? So that's Councillor George. Do I see a seconder on the item? Councillor McKiernan. So all those in favour of the item? Any against? Thank you. This planning application has been approved subject to the vote. Thank you. If any members of the public would like to leave now, they may do so before we move on to the next item. Thank you. We'll now move on to the last item for today's agenda. So planning application P2024-01198 is the reserved matters application, being details of appearance, layout, scale and landscaping, pursuant to the outline planning permission reference number P2021000868. in relation to the Phase 1 to include the erection of 299 residential dwellings, use Class 3, 81 number bedroom care home building for the elderly, use Class C2, and the associated public open space and associated infrastructure works. Site address is land at Tutbury Road, Burton-on-Trent, DE13 0TZ. If I pass over to the planning officer to present the item.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm conscious everybody's had a long committee, but equally it's important that, forgive me if I go on a little bit, because obviously quite a lot of ground to cover, and obviously it's important that there's, material issues affecting everybody. Just need to flag up, there's an update sheet on this item, which I'll refer to as I go along, and it also involves the officer recommendation at the end as well. So, Chair, as you say, this is a reserved matters application for 299 dwellings and an 81-bed care home. It's the first phase of the wider development of the site up at bounded by Tutbury Road, Rosden Drive and Harehedge Lane. The site has a spy road access being built at the present moment in time. Hope they're not using it. Right, so the application site in front of us, members will be familiar with the site as it was part of the wider site that we discussed at committee in September, which changed the outline planning permission and changed the kind of format and how it would come forward. So I'll try and briefly go through things just to cover off everything. Just in terms of topography and locality, so in terms of the application site itself, we're dealing with the southern part of the 500 houses. The northern part will come forward in due course. So in terms of the locality, you've got the St Modwyn School adjacent on the on the Tuckby Road. You've got the Beacon Hotel. You've got Wilson Way that's been developed in more recent times off Harehedge Lane. You've got the existing dwellings. I'm going to call it the barn. It's Nijalan Barn, but I'll call it the barn thereafter, which is a converted barn to residential use, and the homestead, which is the property adjacent to that, and then adjacent to that, as well, as I mentioned to members this morning in the committee report, there's a planning permission for a new dwelling there as well. You've got residential properties on opposite side on Harehedge Lane, and you've got the school, and then as you go to the Bitham Lane, Rolleston Road Junction, you've got residential properties facing over. You've got the existing field at the moment, otherwise, apart from the residential properties there. In the northern section, you've also got residential properties there and there, but we're not dealing with those today. So again, I just mark that up for a little bit of context for members, just to, as I've gone through, just to remember where everything is. So there's the school, the two schools, Rolleston Road, Athelston Way, that's the council has asked for this morning. And then in terms of the actual parishes, the whole of the southern half fits within the Outwards parish, so therefore it's the Outwards neighbourhood plan, which is referenced in the document. And Rolleston parish relates to the northern area, and again isn't referenced today. So members obviously walked around quite a lot of the site today, just a little bit of a jog of memories, just so we can go around it where we've been. So this is photographs overlooking over to on Harehedge Lane from the Bitham Junction. This is looking towards Rolleston Road from Harehedge Lane. This is the view from Harehedge Lane, and then the view of Wilson Way. Views from Tuckby Road. And then some more views from Tuckby Road. And just added a couple more pictures in just to reflect where we went today. So this is the view towards Wilson Way from Harehedge Lane. So what you're actually looking at is the junction into the development site in the foreground. We walked up there today, so this is the views from Wilson Way towards the care home site. And then that was the cycleway that we noted. Again, the view from Wilson Way, which will be towards the housing site. The view towards the barn and the homestead, that's viewed from the new access, and that's looking from Harehedge Lane. So that's the existing barn we went to today, and the garden area. And then this is the other side, that's the homestead. And then that's looking back across from Rolleston Road. So you've got the homestead, the barn, their garden areas, and then you've got Wilson Way in the background. So if that gives a full concept of context of where we're going with the application. So the extant planning permission, I don't need to go through the whole of this, I'm sure, but in overall terms, the outline permission provides for 500 dwellings. The local centre, which isn't part of today's application, that would come forward at a future time. And then you've got the green infrastructure, the specialist accommodation, which is part of the current application. And then the new junction onto Harehedge Lane, which would also serve the local centre and the community car park, which have to be delivered after the first occupation of the 50th dwelling on the development. So essentially, I'd like to say it's the skeleton, the outline hybrid permission has got the skeleton of things, so that's put in place the roads and the infrastructure proposals, and now what we're doing is we're dealing with the devil in the detail in terms of the application for the residential and the care home. So in terms of land use, this is what was established by the outline permission. And the changes with the section 73 quite recently, which was the care home was relocated from its position originally at B, and B is now proposed as residential. as the proposed movement plan. Members again remember this from September because of the deferral, that there was a new restriction in terms of the one-way system that would prevent traffic from going north to south along from the northern part of the development onto Harehedge Lane. And just for completeness, those are the views of the Spine Road access points. And then finally, as part of the Section 73, there was a green and blue infrastructure plan which put in place a linear park through the centre of the site, and then a green space around the Suds area in the southeastern corner. The planning permission also put in place, outlined the Section 106 clauses. So I'm just merely showing you the slide just to remind members that that's already in place, and it doesn't need to be repeated as part of the Reserved Matters application. It's all been sorted with the outline planning permission, and that will come forward as the development proceeds. So this application itself relates to 299 residential dwellings, of which 99 are affordable, and then there's an 81 number bed care home for the elderly. There's associated public open space and associated infrastructure works. So in general terms, again, we talked about this morning, but I'll just go round it, starting in the bottom corner. Is you've got the entrance off Harehedge Lane there, which would have a build out which would prevent traffic coming south. So the only properties that are going to be in and out are the ones at the front. They're all two-storey buildings. You've got the area for the local centre, which doesn't form part of this application. You've got the barn and the homestead and the planning permission. Then you've got the open green space and the Suds areas. So that's the frontage onto Harehedge Lane. In terms of the access through, then you'll be faced with the nursing home in front of you as you are entering off Harehedge Lane, and then you've got residential properties on the south side there, and properties immediately behind the barn and the homestead. And then the rest of it is a residential development, basically astride the linear park that runs through the centre of the site. So there's a whole series of plans that came with this application. So I'll be referencing them with as we go through, but I can't show them all. But I mean, essentially, there's a whole series of plans showing the tree removal, the tree replacement, the hedgerow removal, the hedgerow replacement. So I'll touch on those subjects. But I presented the layout on this illustrative plan as it covers most of those aspects in the broadest sense. So in terms of affordable housing, as was said, all the application allocation is actually being built on site. So there's a combination of a mix between affordable rent, first homes, and scaling up residential affordable dwellings within the site. So that's the general layout. There's been quite a lot of negotiations to try and avoid clustering as much as possible. So members obviously will come to that in the description and assessment. In terms of the proposed streetscapes, there are a number of streetscapes, but I'll just draw upon a couple of the main ones. And that's the trouble with using somebody's computer. So going back to the streetscapes, so in terms of the entry into the site of Harehedge Lane, that's the care home. That would be, although you wouldn't see a full view of it because obviously it'd be surrounded by houses, but that's the streetscape. That's the dwellings on Wilson Way, and that's the residential properties as it goes through the application site. Similarly, you've got the care home and residential properties. On this slide, you've got the 3-storey houses that overlook the Suds area. And then you've got another couple of examples of the streetscapes within the actual development site. Now, as part of the application process, and again I mentioned it this morning, there was the care home was part of the wider discussions that took place, because Homes England had the Design Midland people on board, so we went to a series of design panel views, and this is the evolution of the scheme from different incarnations until you got to the scheme that's been presented today. In terms of overall, there's been a change in this kind of concept, the scale, and the design of the building. It clearly is a conception of a modern architectural building, and that's the care home's perspective. So just to run through it, you've got the resident, that's the facing elevation as you go up from Hare Hedge Lane. You've got a garden area, seating, raised garden beds, planting on the boundary to Wilson Way. So that's basically the secluded or the quiet area for any residents. And then across up the front, you've got the access, pedestrian access separate, and then you've got the car parking area. And that's it shown in clear layout there. So that's the sitting out areas. That's the you've got planting along to the frontage. You've got the car parking area. And then just in terms of elevations, just showing in the context of the adjoining properties. The light blue you can see is the scale of the building as it was originally proposed. But obviously, as I mentioned to members this morning, at the end of the day, we're dealing with application on its own merits, and it's as it is at the minute. So again, just the elevations. Also discussed this morning, and so just to put this in context before we go on to the assessment, this is the relationship with the barn and the homestead. So we stood behind the barn today, and the people in question, the applicant, the owners of the barn had put a 10-metre pole that showed a 10-metre reading. So the distance is 10 metres is the rear garden area, which is the rear garden area in our design standards. The overall distance is 24.5 metres. So that's 24.5 metres between the rear elevation of a single-storey barn and the two-storey dwellings on the application site. That's it shown in cross-section. So that's the nearest dwelling to the facing room. The neighbours also made reference to the other plot, which was the one that was plotted 4 metres from the corner, and that's shown there on that cross-section there. So just hoping that obviously everybody's got a clear concept in combination with today's visit. That's what you would be looking at. We just also put together a little montage as well. So in terms of looking from behind from the barn, you're looking at rear elevations here, that one, and then that terrace is that terrace there. In terms of the boundary treatment, there's a 2.4 metre high boundary wall being proposed to that rear boundary, common boundary with the barn. Just in terms of the care home, just to show the dimensions similarly, because these are the nearest properties. You're 16 metres as a minimum from the common boundary with residential properties on Wilson Way, and 21 metres away from the actual gables of the properties, as members noticed today and was on the photograph. Just in terms of public open space, or the open space areas, it's a combination of different aspects. But you've got communal areas, you've got open space areas, you've got the paths walking around, you've got the suds area incorporated within that, and then you've got the linear park, and then you've got these green wedges as you run along, which was an important part of the aspect of the design review panel when they were looking at the scheme. So if we just take a little sip of water. In terms of all the consultees, I mean, they're all set out in the committee report, so I'm not going to necessarily go through all of them, other than to say that in the broadest terms that they've either got no objection in principle, or they consider things need to come forward as per the outline planning permission. Active England want to encourage that the travel plan is used to increase sustainable travel, and that's something that the County Council will bear in mind as the travel plan is discussed and reviewed as part of the outline planning permission. In terms of publicity and local comments, there's no representations received from Outwards Parish or Stretton Parish. Rolleston Parish Council commented that they had no comments to make on the application. The Civic Trust raised objections. They had concerns about worsening traffic congestion, particularly in peak school times, adverse impact on access to local amenities, schools and GPs. The Spine Road is likely to be used as a shortcut, increasing traffic through local villages, and any loss of trees on Rolleston Road needs to be replaced. In terms of the CPRE, they also, similar to Active England, thought it was important that issues of transport connectivity, infrastructure provision and local character preservation need to be addressed to ensure the development meets the long-term needs of local communities. There have been 3 consultations as part of this application. As I mentioned to members this morning, it's gone through a number of iterations in terms of design. No ward members commented at any part of that process. There's been a total number of 27 local residents who have raised objections and concerns in relation to the submission, and these are in terms of key summary points down below. I'd refer members again always to the committee report where we set out a full list of things. So generically, these are obviously important. The noise and disturbance, loss of privacy, pollution, overlooking, overbearing, overshadowing impacts, need for green buffer, and the need for appropriate boundary treatments. In terms of highway impacts, the concern about increasing car use, increased use of Wilson Way for school parking, traffic congestion concerns, congestions about school safety, and accuracy about the traffic survey work, which was something that obviously there was a lot of discussion on at the outline stage when the Section 73 came forward. In terms of the flooding and drainage, concern that it would not be sufficient to alleviate surface water concerns. In terms of visual amenities, there was concern about the scale of the care home element and that the development of the care home would be out of character and not in keeping with the council's own SPD. In terms of open space, biodiversity and trees, concerns that's insufficient landscaping, concerns about the failure to mitigate loss of green spaces, biodiversity, trees and hedges. In terms of engagement with locals, there was a contention that the responses of neighbours and local residents have not been responded to during the consultation and application process. Finally, there's a number of other matters such as moving of telegraph poles, which would fall outside the remit, and that would be BT. No mitigation on local infrastructure, which is covered by the already covered by the Section 106 agreement for education and health, and then impacts on Wilson Way of the proposed footpath cycle link, which members of course saw was always intended to go in place. In terms of local plan policies, I'm not going to read them all out, they're all set out in the committee report. So if I go on to key areas in terms of assessment, it's considered that the development is acceptable in principle. There's already a planning permission in place. It's a sustainable urban extension in a sustainable location. In terms of the housing mix and affordable housing provision, officers are content that it's sufficiently in line with the aims of the council's supplementary guidance on housing choice. So that's in terms of providing housing mix, in terms of providing the mix of affordable housing, in terms of tenure and room numbers. In terms of visual amenity and heritage impacts, it's considered the housing element in terms of its siting, density, scale and design respects the topography of the site and is in keeping with the character of the locality. In terms of the nursing home or the care home, it's considered the scale, mass and articulation design of the care home would effectively be sufficiently in keeping with the new streetscape, having regard to the criteria set by the Design Midlands Design Review Panel. Finally, there are no detrimental impacts on built heritage assets and no archaeological implications. In terms of residential amenity impacts, which obviously members we specifically concentrated and looked at this morning, It's considered that the application dwellings are to be provided with acceptable garden area sizes, separation distances between themselves, and habitable room dimensions. It's also considered that proposed dwellings and care home are not considered to be likely to give rise to levels of overbearing, overshadowing or overlooking impacts in terms of their relationship with existing dwellings so as to warrant any reason of refusal of planning permission. The scheme is also considered unlikely to give rise to levels of noise and disturbance or airborne pollution that would materially have detrimental impacts on local residents. In terms of highway safety, the County Highway Authority, like ourselves, have had numerous meetings during this application process and have now got no objections, including in concluding that the scheme as revised is in line with the parameters set out with the hybrid and outline approval, and also consider that the vehicle and cycle provision is in line with the necessary standards. Just whipping through these other final things. In technical terms, flood and land contamination is fully mitigated. In terms of biodiversity, the county ecologist is content that the necessary mitigation measures, including BNG, are being proposed in line with her comments that were provided at the outline stage, and the tree officer has raised no objections. So, for example, there's plenty of bats and bird boxes, hedgehog highways. We've also got compensatory hedge planting for the bits that are being removed for the creating of accesses or the development, for example. The submission also shows that there's an appropriate areas of open space provided, including formal and informal play facilities. The SUDS area in this instance is considered to be an integral part of this open space experience and reasonably can be counted towards it. The site has good transport links and cycle links for a development site, and the care home incorporates solar panels, whereas the applicants are proposing that the designing in sustainable construction energy efficiency measures are going to be an exemplar for sustainable development in national terms. So in conclusion, and I'll refer members to relevant conditions and reports. The proposal is considered to be compliant with the development and national planning policies. The local planning authority and indeed the local highway authority have worked proactively with applicants to secure a development which we believe to be in the interest of economic, social and environmental conditions. We believe we have taken on board representations that have been made as part of that process and negotiated on the basis of that. Obviously, members have been on site today and will have their own view on that matter. So in overall terms, the recommendation of officers is to approve as per the conditions in the officer report with the amendments in the update sheet, which include some minor tweaks on the plan numbers, and then there are two new conditions, one relating to ancillary use is of the, like the hairdressers, the cinema, the cafe within the care home use, and also in relation to any plant and machinery and external features on the care home to control those going forward. Also be subject to a variation to the legal agreement. This relates to the housing mix. There are some residential properties on the site. They were originally proposed as 3-bedroom properties. They've been changed to 2-bedroom properties with a study, and officers think it important that the applicants market those as 2-bedroom properties with studies, and hence the reason why that's been brought forward is because that's off-site and it's considered necessary to control that by way of an amendment to the legal agreement. So in conclusion, the officer recommendation is one to approve.
Thank you. I have 3 speakers on this item, so if I could ask for Julia Allen to come up first, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak. There's just a couple of points that we need to make with regards to the property in the Jelluin Barn, with regards to dominance, security and noise from the new properties. So I represented Mr and Mrs Louch at Nageluen Barn firstly in 2017. Initially there as their planning agent for a proposed extension, and our engagement with East Staffordshire Borough Council was extremely positive, and we secured a domestic extension on their behalf, and we were advised in no uncertain terms that Nageluen Barn was at that time considered a non-designated heritage asset, and therefore the extension had to be sympathetically designed, which we did and successfully constructed. It is a single story extension, and it had to be sympathetically designed because it is a non-designated heritage asset. We do feel that that has been overlooked now. Mr and Mrs Louch are extremely concerned and disappointed that the plots to the rear of the property, 196 to 200, have not been relocated. And you have all seen today the overbearing impact of and the visual impact that the new two-storey properties will have upon this single-storey barn. The new properties will overwhelm Nageluen Barn and will completely engulf the property, having an immeasurable impact. And you have seen from yourselves that there will be no screening. There is no screening provided within the proposals whatsoever. So the site is also elevated, and therefore the impact will be greater as well. We would like to take this opportunity to thank the Planning Committee for visiting Nageluen Barn this morning, because at no point in the process before today were Mr and Mrs Louch asked to provide access for the Planning Committee to see the visual impact that would impact them. Secondly, security. It's important to know that whilst the proposals do include a 2.4 metre brick wall to the north and the top left-hand corner, which is the western, when the local centre comes forward, we implore you to support Mr and Mrs Louch in screening from the local centre and support a wall continuing down that western side to improve their security and to secure them. In addition to this, noise from the local properties, the new properties, you know, we would like to see that, you know, the conversations over hot tubs, we would like a restriction of no hot tubs to be in the amenity areas of the new properties as well, plots 196, 197, 189, 199 and 200. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could just press your mic off for me, please. Thank you. If I could ask for Colin McLean to come up, please.
Chairman, councillors and officers, my name is Colin McLean. I've lived on Harehead Lane for over 32 years. This afternoon, I ask the Planning Application Committee to reach a majority decision to defer the approval of this reserved matters application. I ask that the resubmission must include a permanent car parking, schools and road safety solution to address the traffic parking needs within the local environs. Why do I ask this? I interpret that the current application for layout fundamentally does not address the requirements detailed in the Outwoods Neighbourhood Plan as made on the 17th of August 2015. Furthermore, over this 10-year period, the residents have all witnessed a significant increase in road traffic flow and road congestion on Harehead Lane and surrounding roads, particularly during school drop-off and collection times. In my view, we cannot ignore this change. Quoting directly from the Neighbourhood Plan, Firstly, development design and layouts should promote a street hierarchy which is sensitive to users' needs and which prioritises the safety of pedestrians. Harehedge Lane, Ralston Road and Tutbury Road cannot be ignored as part of this street hierarchy. Secondly, adequate and suitable off-street parking should be provided in all new developments in order to minimise obstruction of the highway. And finally, parking provision to meet the identified needs of the school and accommodate sufficient space for other ancillary uses. My observation is that this housing development for 299 residential dwellings plus an 81-bed home building pound traffic flow the layout of this development requires an off-street parking solution for the traffic currently using Harehedge Lane for school drop-offs and collections. With a deferred decision, there are positives. An off-street parking solution would be proactive for the local community. Off-street parking would act as an enabler for two-way traffic flow along Harehedge Lane. Off-street parking can deliver for all road users the introduction of a strategy of single yellow lines and timed parking restrictions on local roads. I ask the Planning Committee to defer the decision on this revised matters submission. Thank you for your time. Submission.
Thank you. If I can ask for the final speaker on this item, Michael Borough, to come forward, please.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Michael Borough, planning consultant at Savills, representing the applicant Barratt David Wilson Homes. The Barratt Group has been awarded 5-star status from the HBF for 16 years and is working in partnership with Homes England to deliver the first 300 dwelling phase of a development which is allocated in the adopted local plan and has already been granted outline planning permission. The reserved matter scheme includes compliant land use distribution, pedestrian and cycle connectivity, and over 7 acres of public open space. In order to limit traffic impact on Harehedge Lane, traffic from this entrance is being limited to northbound only beyond the local centre. Significantly, the scheme design ensures that separation distances between the new proposed dwellings and care home elements of the scheme and the existing joining residential properties not only meet but exceed the separation distances set out in the Council's own separation distances SPD, to enable an acceptable degree of amenity to be provided. This residential scheme has been designed to be unlike anything determined in East Staffordshire to date. It demonstrates a very high level of architectural design, taking on board comments made by independent design champions Design Midlands, incorporates exemplar standards of energy efficiency to the not yet in force future home standards and beyond, and includes a discovery house for educational purposes to showcase new technology. The development is an important milestone for the house building industry in terms of meeting and bettering government carbon reduction targets and is expected to attract national coverage. The 81-bed specialist care home has been designed by a specific care home operator and includes additional facilities for the care home residents. The care home design has been considered by Design Midlands on 4 separate occasions, and significant amendments have been made to the design, including in terms of massing and scale, which include reducing the height of the main elevations to 2.5 stories, introducing projecting dormers, which punctuate the eaves and provide greater articulation to the roofscape to add further visual interest into the elevations. The Design Midlands February 2026 response concludes that the care home design has responded positively to the design review feedback, including resulting in this building sitting well within the streetscape without being dominant or overbearing. Your planning officers have highlighted the acceptability of the overall design approach. This exemplar scheme is accordingly being presented to you today for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got the planning officer just wants to come back before we move any further.
Yes, Chair, I don't want to get in the way of any debate. I just want to make a couple of factual points. In terms of, there was a discussion about, the point was made on behalf of the occupants of the barn about no hot tubs, for example, in the properties 196 to 200. Just draw members' attention to the fact that condition 9 on the opposite recommendation is specifically related to removing permitted development rights on those plots in terms of extensions, alterations and buildings within the curtilage of those new dwellings. So that would put a control with the local planning authority for any proposals that come forward in the future. So they would necessarily need to be subject to a planning application. There was quite a lot of comment on some of the highways matters. I'll obviously defer to members' discussion on highways, other than to say, obviously the issue of the amount of traffic on Hareheads Lane, the traffic safety measures, etc., were all matters that we covered at the outline permission stage and discussed the possibility of yellow lines. It's for the development to wash its own face in terms of car parking, in terms of the provision on the application itself. And as the County Highway Authority have said in their comments, it meets the necessary standards. There was also one point I need to remind members of, is that even though it's not the developer's role to necessarily answer the problems of the school, there is already a permission in place that provides for the community car park, which comes forward on the which will be on the site where the local centre is, and that will provide at least 36 spaces. So that has already been provided as part of the original outline planning permission. It's not part of today's application, but that provision has already been made.
Thank you. I'll now open the floor up for debate for committee members. Do I have anybody indicating wishing to speak first? Councillor Whittaker.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to sympathise with the locals and anybody using that length of road. And in the past, we've had so many discussions with the County Council about drop-offs to schools and things, which has never been in their remit. So I don't feel we can address it any further than we have done with what Mr. Harvey just said about the using the car parking spaces to at least alleviate some of the problems. I do think what's in front of us is a good scheme. I think it's been well thought out. I think the design is more than acceptable in today's terms, and I think the work has been put into this, which makes our job a lot easier. I sympathise with the owners of the barn, whether their problems can be sort of mitigated with some plantings along that top hedge or whatever, but I don't really think we can do much as a committee to enhance their situation at this present point.
Thank you. Do I have any other member wishing to come into the debate? Councillor Holton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can we just elaborate, as we're looking at the site itself for the application, the car parking within the site for residents that are moving in? How much car parking has been allocated for each dwelling, please?
So obviously, I'm not being facetious here by saying that there's obviously 299 dwellings, but basically the car parking standards are based on the number of bedrooms in any particular property. So where a property goes up to 3 bedrooms, there's a requirement for 2 spaces, and when it's 4 or more bedrooms, it's requirement for 3 spaces. So what we do when we're doing this work is go round all those plots and ensure that that provision is made. So there's also a separate car parking area for the care home. So again, that's 36 spaces and 2 spaces for larger vehicles within the care home site. So that in itself they're not parking on the residential road, there's separate provision for them as well. So that's how the car parking standards are all met, pro rata, or go around the whole development.
Thanks, Chair. Can I come back? Okay, so the 36 spaces referred to in the centre are separate from the care home. Okay.
Yes, the requirement for the 36 spaces has always been within the site, but then will come forward as the local centre. So that's there. Where I'm just pointing on my arrow at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. And those 36 spaces within the centre, they will be accessible to people coming on Heritage Lane, visiting the schools or going in, dropping off?
Yes, that was the whole purpose of that requirement, was to provide that facility. So there's an in and out access to and from Heritage Lane. But that's already in the outline planning permission.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Just to confirm or clarify, will that centre be open and that space at all times throughout the day, particularly between 8 and 10, and again at 2:30 till 3:30?
Yes, there's a requirement for that provision to be retained. That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Do I have any other committee member? Councillor Smedley.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a clarification. On the plan, the housing plan, on the barn, behind it there's affordable housing. I just wondered if you knew what the key was for the red, the blue and the orange. I just wondered if it was first time buyer or shared ownership.
There's shared ownership.
Yeah.
The 3 are all different.
Different, yeah.
Top of my head, I can't.
Just okay.
But I mean, in terms of, it wouldn't normally be something.
You go into that depth? No. No, it's okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments from committee members? So thank you, members. We don't have any further comments noted. So just summarising the position before the committee today. We've got this is a reserved matters application submitted by David Barrett of Wilson Homes for the phase 1 of the Tutbury Road Sustainable Urban Extension, covering 299 residential developments and the 81 bedroom care home and associated open space and infrastructure. You've heard the debate, you've heard the officers' comments. Officers have assessed the scheme carefully against national and local policy and are satisfied that the residential element is acceptable in terms of design, scale, amenity, landscaping, drainage, ecology and highways. So moving forward to the officer's recommendation for approval, do I see a proposer? Councillor McKiernan. Do I see a seconder? Councillor Holton. So moving forward, all those in favour of the application? Thank you, that's unanimous, so the application has been approved. Thank you. Swiftly moving on to agenda item number 6. Request members to consider the appeals received and determined. Is that noted? Noted. Thank you. Agenda item number 7. Request members to consider the planning permission circulated with the agenda. Is that noted? Thank you. We will now move into the private part of the meeting. That in accordance with Section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting as it is likely, in view of the nature of business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that there will be disclosed exempt information as defined in paragraphs of Part 1, Schedule 12A of the Act indicated in brackets before each item number on the agenda. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Whittaker. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous.